Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you joined us for this episode. And today I have Jordan Wilson with us. Jordan is a business owner. Is that right, Jordan?
That is correct, sir.
And he's grown up kind of in and around the Midwest area. He is somebody I just recently met, Matt Cox, Spirituality Adventure producer, connected us and said, hey, Jordan's got a kind of a cool story, and I think he'd be good on the podcast. So thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
What's the name of your company?
Up Consulting. So UP, Up Consulting. So we specialize in helping small business owners really to kind of find business breakthroughs and accelerate profitability.
Okay. So How long you been doing that?
So Up Consulting has been around. We've been around for 2 years now, coming up on our second year. So It's been a lot of fun. I did consulting in the past, so I had about 10 years of consulting experience before kind of starting this one. Took a break from consulting and actually bought a plastics manufacturing company down in southern Missouri, down on the Arkansas border, in the middle of nowhere. So got out of Kansas City for a couple years and then moved back late in 21. And December of 21 and kind of started to lay the roots for the consulting business then. So,
all right. Excellent. Well, I'm going to come back to the business side of things, but let's kind of help our audience get to know you a little bit. Like, where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was your family background like?
Yeah, absolutely. So born in Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska. Both my parents grew up in the same tiny town, less than 1,000 people, Weeping Water, Nebraska. So it's kind of just small farm community. So most of my extended family still have ties to farming. And born there, lived there till I was about 5, and then moved around quite a bit. I think I went to like 5 different kindergartens. So we moved, every year pretty much until I would say I was in middle school, and then we landed in Andover, Kansas, which is on the east side of Wichita. So middle school and high school, I grew up in Wichita, and then went to the University of Kansas after high school. So proud Jayhawk. We got a big game tonight against K-State, who beat us a couple weeks ago. So
I know. So we're recording this on January 31st, 2023. And for those of you who don't follow KU basketball, KU got beat by K-State for the first time in 8 years or something like that? Was it?
Yeah, I think it's been like 7 seasons, 7 or 8
at
seasons.
Least, yeah. So now they have their rematch tonight, and I'm guessing KU is going to get a little bit of revenge. Are they playing in Allen Fieldhouse tonight?
It's in Allen Fieldhouse, so a little bit of a different story when we play at home, hopefully.
Yeah, but let's jump back to Wichita. So I was born in Wichita, Kansas.
Awesome.
I was born at St. Francis Hospital. I think now it's some other kind of mental health facility or something like that. But any rate, what high school did you go to?
Andover Central. So Andover is east side of Wichita. And so Andover was just one school until I was in middle school. I think when I was in sixth grade, they opened up Andover Central. And so I ended up going there.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you do any sports in high school?
Oh yeah. Big time sports. Football, baseball, ran track.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. My dad's a Wichita guy. He played basketball at Wichita North in the 50s. He's 87. Awesome. He's 87 now. And then he went on basketball scholarship to a little college in McPherson, Kansas.
Okay. Yep.
And played there for a couple of years and then went into the Coast Guard. But because he's such a huge basketball fan, he put a basketball in my hand since I was a little kid. Even though I was never really great basketball player, I ended up being a really good distance runner, like cross country track stuff. But my dad raised me on a love for basketball and a love for KU basketball.
There you go.
And NAIA basketball, small school basketball, you know.
Yep.
So, but I'm a Baylor grad. So the only time I get conflicted is when Baylor and KU play.
Yeah.
And then I'm like going, you know, I grew up with KU, but I gave a lot more money to Baylor. So I think I'm going to choose
something
Baylor.
About that changes things. Yeah.
Oh man.
I understand that.
Yeah. So what did you major in at KU?
Yeah. So it's interesting being 18 and they ask you to kind of choose what it is that you want to do for the rest of your life. So I think I picked doctor at that point in time. I said, oh, well, doctors make a lot of money. I think I'll do that. So I started off in chemical engineering, ended up actually changing it a couple years later, just stuck with biology. But with all of the chemistry that I had, I ended up with 2 degrees. So a degree in biology and then a degree in biological chemistry.
Okay. And tell us about your family background. What was your family like? Did you have a faith background? Was there a business culture background in your family? You mentioned the little farm towns
Yep.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about kind of the family context as it relates to, like, say, your family faith and your family business orientation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, always grew up in the church. Both my parents, so they kind of cool story. They went to the same daycare before preschool. They started dating in like 4th or 5th grade, never dated anybody else. They got married when they were 19 years old. So still together, happily married today.
Good for them.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of, unique in today's world. So I'm very blessed to have, a great example of family, growing up. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. So I have two younger sisters and then a younger brother who's 11 years younger than me. So quite a bit younger. But yeah, we grew up, I think my mom's side grew up in a Methodist church. Dad's side grew up in the Lutheran church. We moving all over. We never really had a set denomination, I guess, as far as church that we went to. So more non-denominational, Bible preaching. The church that we went to in Andover, you may be familiar with Metro East, was the church that I kind of grew up in. It's a Baptist church, but yeah, so always had real strong roots to my Christian faith growing up. Was an advocate leader for it throughout high school. A part of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Fellowship of Christian Students. So it always played a big role. College was different than transitioning to an extremely liberal school and studying sciences. That was an interesting time as far as crossroads for faith, science, how to navigate, where my beliefs and all of those things kind of came together. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, interesting. I was like when I was 14, I was an athlete, but when I was 14, I kind of got into the recreational drug scene. Did that for a couple of years. My parents started getting worried about me. We got a new Baptist youth pastor at the Baptist church. They made me go to a summer camp the summer after my sophomore year. And I ended up giving my life to Jesus, felt called to be a pastor, and went back my junior year to Park Hill and started the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at Park Hill High School.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was a big transition from my sophomore year to my junior year,
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool.
But yeah, so, and then I went off to Baylor. Now I'm curious. I love the conversations around faith and science. And I've interviewed, all kinds of people on here, including even a couple of people that would be kind of like more atheist scientist kind of people as well.
Right.
So, so I'm curious how did you end up navigating the faith science thing?
And it's all in the pursuit of knowledge. And I don't think I appreciated where I was at when I was in college. And I think I was quick to kind of put up walls, and whenever somebody would challenge either my faith or my beliefs, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there around things such as evolution. What is evolution, and the separation of evolution and the church? And I wasn't educated enough to know that, really that the Catholic Church even backs the theory of evolution, and all that evolution is really talking about is, a designation towards a specific trait over time. And so navigating that, it was an interesting time. And the University of Kansas is extremely liberal. And so a lot of the professors are vocal about their beliefs and, quick to kind of shut down. I remember I even took a course in college. It was called Understanding the Bible. And I picked it up. It was just an elective for, my biology degree is Bachelor of Arts. And so you have to have a certain number of electives in other areas. And I was like, oh, this will be easy. Grew up in the church. It's just going to be a cakewalk. And the whole premise of Understanding the Bible, the course was almost to disprove it. And it was, you had this challenging professor who really wanted to challenge, how it was written, the context of when it was written. And it just rubbed me so wrong that I ended up dropping the course. And so I think my approach to how I evaluate or I guess land on certain beliefs and how the science ties in, I do believe that God has a hand in all of it, and evolution is a proven theory at this point, that there is, natural selection of traits over time, and things do change, and that can fit with my personal beliefs, and they're still being design and God being involved in all of that.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I don't know if you've run across this guy or not, but Francis Collins he was one of the original. Well, he was the guy. Him and one other guy were a part of the Human Genome Project.
Okay,
and they were the ones that literally decoded, DNA, and all the information that is in the DNA. So they literally mapped it. They were the guys. And then he's been the director of the National Institute of Health, NIH, from 2009 to 2021. So he even was in that position all the way through the pandemic. He's a brilliant science guy, but he's also a believer. And he wrote a book called The Language of God, Francis Collins, but then he also founded a website and a podcast called BioLogos. So bio being, the Latin word for life, logos, and the Greek word for the word or the principle of everything that's out there, kind of the way the Greeks used it. So, at any rate, it's an excellent podcast, and they just bring on all kinds of scientists that are all over the map in terms of, their understanding of God, or they could be atheist, agnostics, or believers, but they have this incredible platform, and they bring in every kind of scientist, that you can think of, and it just really good stuff. I've always been kind of a fan of theirs, and certainly, they believe that, their stance would be that God is involved in the process of evolution. God is from the beginning constantly creating, creating out of creation, creating out of creation, creating out of creation. And that God's been a part of that process from the beginning. So that would be kind of my position as well. I was never, I went to Baylor, and actually Baylor in the early 80s when I was there was the religion professors were actually quite liberal as well. And, but was interesting. Like, I would take geology, and my geology professor believed in evolution, but believed in God too, And so I had a lot of, interesting professors that integrated faith and science. So that kind of put in me, cause I always loved science. And that put in me that I've always tried to integrate the two throughout most of my life and career,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your, moving from college into the business world, and maybe give us a little insight into the ups and downs of what that was like for you.
Right. Well, I think it all kind of ultimately leads up to, where I am today. And it's been an interesting journey. And I think it kind of all goes back to really that uncertainty of being in college and not necessarily knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I thought it was maybe towards med school, but I worked, a few jobs through school, was paying it off as I went. By the time I graduated with my bachelor's, I was like, I'm not going to any more school. I'm done with that. I ended up getting into protein science, was a food scientist for a couple of years in Chicago after I graduated. That business ended up closing. I think the owners got into some stuff. Don't know exactly what it was, but there was, it kind of went from, chapter 11 bankruptcy to chapter 7 rather quickly. They pulled like 2,000 employees into an auditorium and said, it's the last day. So here you go. Luckily I had,
where was that at? Where was that?
Bolingbrook, Illinois. So just 15 miles outside of downtown Chicago. So I was living in downtown Chicago at the time, working in Bolingbrook. The name of the company was Quantum Foods. It was a protein processing. So it was a pretty cool job as a food scientist. My biggest account was actually Subway restaurants. So we made all the protein solutions for different restaurant concepts or, retail too. So we made the steaks that you see on the shelves at Walmart or whatever it may be at your grocery stores. And my biggest account was working with Subway restaurants. So we provided, all of the different meats that you see in their restaurants. And so when that company closed, I had this unique opportunity, built some good relationships actually with Subway. They had me kind of act as a consultant, and I got to travel around to other manufacturing plants and kind of get them up to speed on all the projects that I had been working on for them. And so that was really kind of my first introduction into the consulting world. And so it was kind of a fun experience, 24-year-old kid traveling around, getting to be a part of different organizations and work with different teams, and really, really enjoyed it. And at that time, so in college, I met my now ex-wife. And so was transitioning through that. She moved to Chicago with me. We actually moved back to Kansas City so she was a few years younger than me, so she could go back to the University of Kansas and continue working. I was working just kind of remotely, traveling, doing consulting, working with different manufacturing companies, things of that nature. So we ended up getting married eventually. Along that journey, I think it's interesting, and looking back on it, just that the spirituality, that there was definitely some identity crises that were happening that I don't think I was aware of at the time. And I don't know exactly when it started, where it stemmed from. But I think kind of graduating with these degrees, not wanting to continue my education, I never grew up and said, I want to be a protein scientist. You know, I don't like working in labs. I don't want to, that wasn't exactly a passion of mine, or the journey that I saw myself on. I knew that I wanted to help people, and I was passionate about that, but that was about as far as it went. So I think professionally, in my mid-20s, were really this flux state of just trying to find paychecks and also trying to navigate what I enjoyed doing, and finding, something that I felt gave me purpose or meaning. And I think in that, without that piece in my professional life, it kind of, I really drifted towards finding that sense of identity or purpose in my relationship with my ex-wife. I think there were some strong codependency habits that ended up developing, and it put stress on things. But it just this lack of meaning, for lack of a better word, I guess, but lack of purpose was really where I felt spiritually. I had kind of gotten out of the habit of going to church. It was something, I still had my beliefs, my religious ties. It was always there, but I wasn't practicing my faith. I wasn't active in my faith. And so I think without that, it was just this big search. And I didn't even realize or know what it was I was searching for, if that makes sense. And I know that you've mentioned recovery before. I've caught a couple of your podcasts, but that was something that ended up becoming a big kind of part of my life. I think in those tumultuous times in my mid to late 20s, I had always kind of drank too much. And then after getting married, there were some issues in our marriage, and unfortunately things kind of fell apart, and that really accelerated my drinking. And kind of really at that point, when you don't feel like you have purpose or meaning in what you're doing professionally, and all of your ties are kind of to your identity are wrapped up in a relationship that has become your foundation, and then that starts to fall apart. Kind of found myself at these crossroads where I didn't know really where I was, completely lost, and ended up leaning on alcohol to kind of drive me through those times.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of crazy. I had that had a period in my, teen years, 14, 15, 16. I was doing the rec drug scene, and that was more of a peer thing, but didn't really want to have anything to do with church. And then I ended up, having this pretty powerful spiritual experience, followed Jesus, became a pastor. Then all these years later, as a pastor, I'd been, didn't wrestle with drugs or alcohol, but had been an insomniac, and I wasn't sleeping much most of 30 years. Finally went to a psychiatrist when I was 55, and he tried me on a bunch of different things, but the thing that worked was it was Xanax. And so, unfortunately, I think this was an older psychiatrist, and he put me on it I was on Xanax every night, for the next like 2.5, 3 years. And I unwisely, stupidly at one point added alcohol on top of the Xanax because the Xanax had kind of worn off and stopped working. And so now I'm drinking and doing Xanax every night. I probably did Xanax and alcohol every night for 2.5 years. And that unraveled me and ended up, losing my marriage, losing my career, literally losing everything virtually except for my life. And then I got in recovery about 3.5 years ago. So, that's been a real big part of my life. The last 3.5 years is the recovery world, the 12-step world. I work with a lot of people in that world now. So how, did you start, were you like drinking in high school, or did you just really kick into that in college? Were you just kind of like a weekend warrior drinker, or did it become daily at some point?
Yeah. So growing up.
And was there any drugs as well, or just alcohol mainly?
Oh, I think in high school, I messed around with marijuana, at some point, but that was, as far as drugs have always scared me. I don't know why, but I've just always kind of, I don't like taking, even over the counter drugs, your ibuprofen, aspirin. I stay away from most drugs altogether. But drinking, both my parents, neither of them ever drank growing up. There was never alcohol in the house. And I was so focused on sports growing up. I was an athlete my whole life. And so it was a no-brainer. I was not going to drink. And so it really wasn't until I got to college and, sports were not relevant anymore. I was no longer competing. And then I started to drink, actually got my start, managing bars in Lawrence, Kansas. So I was working in the scene and around it, bartending. And so just really, that's where I met my ex-wife. We worked together, in a bar, in Lawrence, Kansas. And, so it was always prevalent at that point. And I think I always drank too much. It was more of a weekend warrior thing, I think, through my 20s until the marriage really started to fall apart. That's when it became a daily, habit, to where it was something that was more of a necessity. It kind of just engulfed me at that point because I too, there wasn't sleep without it. There wasn't, all of these things. And so it was the only coping mechanism that I knew of at the time. And so I drifted to it. And
so how long do you think you were drinking every day? Just curious.
Oh, probably a couple years.
Okay. And then were you always telling yourself you were going to quit, or you'd only have this amount? Were you trying to self-limit, or were you just going for it?
There were times, obviously, it would kind of go through, I was fortunate enough to where it did affect my professional life, not to the degree that it could have. I was able to save face. I was able to somehow be able to kind of function. You hear terms like high functioning alcoholic, things like that. And I guess you could consider that me to a certain degree. Looking back on it, I wasn't really functioning at all. I was there, maybe physically, was able to, kind of coast by, but wasn't functioning at a very high capacity by any means. And then, as you kind of get into alcoholism, and there's a point where you're doing it for relief, and then when you start to actually develop those chemical dependencies, to where you've pushed it too far, and now all of a sudden I'm worried to go and even talk in front of employees or something without drinking a beer because they'll notice me shaking, and the beer will help my hands stop from shaking.
Yeah.
And, there's these chemical dependencies that start to happen. And then that's when it gets really scary. And so, there were definite times where I was scared and I knew I needed to try to self-limit, try to wean myself off, and you would, cut out liquor, beer only, or whatever. There's 100 different ways to try and do it. But at that point, it really had me in its grasps, and there was no me being able to navigate or self-regulate at that point.
Wow. Yeah. It stops being fun. It stops being anything other than like, you got to do it just to get through the day kind of a thing. And calm. Yeah. Wow. Well, what was your wake up moment? Because you evidently you got divorced, you kept drinking, you're still doing your job.
Yeah. So at that point,
where were you working at that time when, like, say when you were drinking was at its worst, where were you, what was going on in your work world?
So a lot of it kind of was during this transition time of actually taking over and owning that plastics manufacturing business down in Gainesville. So the divorce happened around the same time. I used the excuse to kind of get out of Kansas City altogether. I needed kind of a fresh start. And so first really experience into business ownership and the difficulties that come along with being at the helm of something. I had, very blessed with some amazing mentors, growing up and in my professional career leading up to that point. But you can have all the knowledge in the world. Nothing prepares you for being a business owner and having a staff. I think, today we have 37 employees. It's always been around that in the 30s. And it's a different world.
So this was was this an existing business?
An existing business.
Was it an LLC or was it a privately owned business? Small privately owned business?
Small privately owned.
And were you a part owner, or did you and somebody else go in to buy it? Or?
Yes, me and my family went in on it together. Okay. So it's something my dad had always kind of worked corporate America, worked for some extremely large corporations, had a ton of professional success throughout his career. He had always wanted to do something. His dream was always to kind of bring the family kind of back together. One sister was a plant manager in a manufacturing plant in Nebraska. I had another sister was a nurse at a hospital in Lincoln. And my brother, at the time, he was still in high school getting ready to graduate. But we kind of started talking about that. What's the future? Where are we going to go? And wanted to try and find something. So I ended up talking with some business brokers. At that point, it didn't really matter what the industry was. Neither of us had, any experience in anything plastics related. But we knew how business works. And so this opportunity kind of came about. And so we jumped at it, and that was, early 2018. And it's been a super fun experience. My siblings all work down there now, live down there. I had to get out. I had to move back to Kansas City. So I still run things kind of remotely, but so that's.
I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. I'm going to take just a quick moment for our listeners out there. Hey, if you've been listening to Spirituality Adventures, like what we're doing, I want to encourage you to jump on the website, spiritualityadventures.com, and join our support team. If you sign up for a monthly donation, you will be able to get our bonus content. Like we did a great fun interview with Jordan here before we got to the main podcast, but there's some great bonus content, and we really are a supporter and listener listener supported podcast. So we really appreciate that. Be sure and listen, and share the content that you enjoy with your social media crowd. And we just greatly appreciate you tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. So back to Jordan. Jordan, I'm curious, what was the name of the company again that you guys bought?
So it was previously Bryant Plastics. Now it's Wilson Industries.
Wilson Industries.
So we make PVC pipe.
Okay.
So,
and what would have been the annual sales of that? What's like the annual sales on that company?
Oh, around 10 million revenue annually.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you bought it, it had about 30 employees or so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then about that time is when you went through a divorce and your drinking was at its worst.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how did that play out?
Well, I think it played into it, I think, at a point. It started out as, me trying to escape the drinking, take on a professional challenge, move away from Kansas City, find something else to kind of pour myself into. The place needed a ton of work. It's a different world down there. It's kind of overrun with lots of its own issues. When we first got down there, we implemented a drug policy, and we lost 80% of our workforce in one day when we implemented a drug policy. So it's,
you mean like you started doing like random drug tests or something like that? Or
not random, just one in order to be employed, you have to be able to pass a drug test. And we do that, do a UA for anybody that comes in. But Ozark County, where Gainesville is the poorest county in the state of Missouri. It's just a different way of life down there. It's beautiful country, sits between, two lakes. A lot of people are just happy living very minimally. They have their trailer and their fishing boat. So there's not a lot of, the drive, the aspiration to excel. So when it comes to staffing anyway, there were just a whole lot of different challenges that I had never experienced in my professional career up to that point. And so trying to navigate all that, I mean, I was literally living at work, converted a small office space above the manufacturing floor, put a mattress in there, literally living in the office. So it was, again, just kind of fed into this. What am I doing? What has my life become? And it accelerated and fed into the drinking and, until it finally kind of hit a head and it hit a point where I was going to lose everything. I had already lost a lot, but I was on the verge of losing my life, And you
were single. Is that right?
I started dating again to my now fiance. So we were together through part of that transition. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But who was there somebody in your life that was like Jordan, you got to get your shit together.
Yeah.
Was there or was it yourself? Did you just come to it on your own?
There were friends, my fiance now obviously was a big part of that. And I think what really woke me up was when it started affecting when coworkers and employees, would make mention. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was as close to rock bottom as you could, get. Just the shame that I felt at that point. And I knew that I had tried every way to try and regulate it on my own. And I needed some type of professional help.
Yeah. 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 When you kind of were trying to describe the small southern Missouri town there.
Yeah.
It made me think, do you remember that movie that was kind of like an independent film that came out called Winter's Bone?
I never saw it.
Okay. Jennifer Lawrence is one of her early movies,
Okay.
And she did an amazing job, but it's literally filmed in the Ozarks in Missouri, and kind of one of these little trailer park meth capital kind of places. And she's trying to navigate. She's like a older sibling that has to take care of her own younger siblings just because the family's so dysfunctional. But anyway, well, so what kind of professional help did you end up seeking, and how are things going?
So it's been coming up on, it'll be 2 years in May since I checked myself into. There's a wonderful, can't say enough amazing things about the rehab that I checked myself into was Synergy Executive, and it's in Springfield, Missouri down there. So I did 30 days of inpatient with them, and it was just a tremendous help. I think I don't know how I would have strung together 30 days without having a drink on my own. So just the fact of being able to get 4 weeks of clarity, and the amount of clarity that comes back to the mind once you allow your body to start healing in that way. So that kind of started, the journey. And then I continued to work with them outpatient, going and trying to educate myself more, just around addiction, around recovery, around what it is. Started doing some deep soul searching. Why did I end up where I was? And that's kind of going back to some of the things I was saying, that in looking back on it all now, I think not having that identity, that sense of purpose, and how those things ended up manifesting into these issues. I really was at this point where there was this lack of identity. I had lost, not necessarily lost my faith, but I wasn't practicing my faith. It wasn't being incorporated in my life in a way to where it was useful to me. So after. Go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, so after the 30 days, kind of really took some time to spend a few months really trying to build up, how can I find those things? And what ended up, this actually ends up playing into the consulting business that I now have. I remember being in therapy and my therapist talking to me, and she introduced me to this Japanese concept, Ikigai. Are you familiar with Ikigai?
No.
So Ikigai, so Ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese concept or philosophy, and it's a tool that they use to help try and derive meaning or purpose. And so really, if you look it up, there's kind of like this Venn diagram that's made. There's 4 different categories. And so the questions that they ask are, what is it that you love to do? What are you good at doing? What does the world need? And then, what can you monetize or make money doing, make a living off of. And so the cross section of those 4 categories, what I love to do, what I'm skilled at, what the world needs, and then what I can get paid to do. And I started really thinking about that. So she introduced me to the concept. I think there's a book that I bought off of Amazon. I think it's just called Ikigai. If you look it up.
Is this the guy's name? Or is it a concept?
No, it's the
name
concept.
of a concept. Okay.
Name of the concept is Ikigai. And that's what your Ikigai is, the intersection of those 4 questions.
Yeah, those are 4 great questions to work with for sure.
And so that's really, where a lot of that exploration was. And that time became this exploration place for me. And, and I've always loved working with people and coaching and helping and developing, and I have a lot of skills and experience in business related areas. And of course you can get paid for it. And so really consulting kind of fit that mold for me. I didn't have it all figured out, kind of right away, but I think that's really, that time in my life was when I really tried to start shifting how I went about living. I wanted to start living with purpose, with intention. I've always said those couple years where I was really drinking every day, they became like this lost time. There was nothing, no growth happening. They were dead years, where there wasn't growth, there wasn't development. And when there's no growth, there's no development. If you're not growing, you're dying. So, right. Since then, my life has been more focused towards that. I try to stay very mission oriented. Figure out what it is that's important to me, figure out exactly where it is that I want to be, where I want to go, and then make progressive steps towards it. People, I've said to people that I've figured out the secret, the key to happiness. And for me, the key to happiness is progress. Finding out ways to just continue to grow, to continue to get better. To me, that equates happiness and meaning.
So what's the name of your company? Tell us again.
Yeah. So Up Consulting.
Up Consulting. Do you have a website for that?
Yeah. So if you check out Up Institute, so upinstitute.com, you can get more information about, kind of what it is that we do. So that's a lot of the work that we do. There was a big need, obviously, kind of through the pandemic. And so all of these transitions are kind of happening at that same time. And the world is shifting in this way where people, they're not happy with their corporate jobs. They're calling it the silent quitting,
the great resignation.
The great resignation. That's the other one, right? And they want to venture out and try all of these things on their own. It's extremely difficult, and the success is not the ratios are not in your favor if you're going to be try to be a small business owner. Right. And so finding a way to where we can help people that are trying to navigate that maybe for the first time is important to us, and that's really where we try to fit in. Just on the educational front, we've gone out and invested in a bunch of educational material. We have complete, virtual MBAs that we offer online to just kind of help bring people up to speed, and then really just helping people lay the foundations and organize. We bring kind of that large corporation mentality. I was very blessed to work with a lot of large successful corporations in the past, bring that large corporation mentality and attention to detail into the small business world and help small business owners navigate it and structure in a way that's going to allow them to grow and be prosperous.
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of entrepreneurs who start these small businesses, they have a vision, a dream, a passion sometimes. But sometimes they don't have the systems approach to, all the different components that go into building a successful company. If you thought about maybe the top 3 things that you've learned about leadership, about small businesses, and about maybe even what small businesses, what's a pretty typical scenario for a small business, and what are some of the top 3 ways that they need to that they can grow and learn and develop, like leadership lesson wise kind of thing?
As far as leadership, I think through those trials and the things that I've learned, I learned a lot about being able to, when you have employees, when you're trying to lead a team, really starting to lean in and listen to what it is that brings them energy. I think, in any professional setting or atmosphere, you have a list of things that need to get done, right? And sometimes those things kind of just get delegated however they get delegated. To me, true leadership is getting to know each person and know their strengths, know their weaknesses, know what brings them energy, what doesn't bring them energy. I've, worked with businesses before and, come in contact with ladies who are in charge of entire sales departments, but hate making phone calls. It's like, how do you get to being a VP of a sales department and you hate being on the phone? Just things like that. But how can we find each individual's assets and place them in positions that are going to highlight, what it is that's bringing them energy? Yeah. And to me, that has been more helpful than anything else, and how I've gone about helping businesses structure their management, their leadership programs, is really kind of focused on individuals and helping people develop. Everybody wants to develop at different rates. Some people have bigger aspirations than other people. We need to understand what those things are, and it all comes down to really communicating. And then I guess the other big thing that I run into quite a bit, and it ties right in with what we've been talking about with this mission, with this vision. I'm a firm believer that a business's mission statement is probably the most underutilized tool that small businesses have. And just being able to derive clarity of purpose of, where it is that they want to go, what it is they're wanting to accomplish, and understanding the difference between, there's business goals as far as like numbers we want to hit, but is it serving some type of an overarching, goal? What is it that we're trying to accomplish for the community? For me, the PVC company, the plastics manufacturing company, it's never been about making plastic. Yes, selling the PVC pipe provides the money, right? But what the goals are to be able to bring quality jobs to a struggling community, to be able to be a pillar of, support for different organizations, different things happening in a community, bring people together, from a place to truly develop skills, opportunity that isn't necessarily prevalent in that area, right? So there's a difference between what makes us the money and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And so I work with business owners to separate those things out and make sure that the whole team is kind of on the same page. And that's really what a mission statement does, is it helps lay the foundations for that type of communication that so many organizations struggle with. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. On your first point, aligning, getting people aligned with their strengths, like a strengths finder kind of idea. Who was the guy that wrote some great books on, working out of your strength? I'm blanking on his name right now. Business guy. Oh. Well, anyway, I'm blanking on the name of the book. But anyway, the strengths finders, that concept of, when you start a small business, like all hands on deck, so everybody's doing everything to cover all the bases, and a lot of times you wind up working way outside your strengths, right? Right. And so trying to get people aligned and moving in their strengths is such a huge deal.
It's a huge deal, and being able to organize it in a way, because that's the other main problem with small business owners is, like you said, it's all hands on deck. People make the joke about the CEO, the chief everything officer, rather than the chief executive officer. And that's really kind of very true for a lot of business owners. They feel like they have to be a part of everything and they're overseeing everything. Yeah. So being able to organize and systemize in a way to where it aligns with those strengths is really the key. Yeah. Because there's those two components and how they fit together.
Matt just showed me, is it Marcus Buckingham? Marcus Buckingham. He's written a lot of good stuff on strengths assessments, working out of your strengths. And then the other point you made about mission, it's so interesting because like you're in a lot of classic economics is goods and services, right? And I forgot to turn my do not disturb. That was me, I think. But yeah, so any rate, I heard one guy say one time, businesses are typically made up of goods and services, but it's really all about service.
Right.
And I heard you talk about your mission, even though you're making plastic pipe, right?
Right.
But the real mission is bigger than that. And it's how you serve your customers, how you serve your employees, how you serve your community, and how 100%. How you make an impact way beyond just this product that you're putting out there on the market. Right. I love that. I love that purpose-driven kind of, missional piece to work life. And it's not just about money and paycheck either, right?
No, it's, to me, I think, and this is what I work with business owners, the more value that we can put out into the marketplace, and you put value out in lots of different ways, right? Not just the goods, the specific services that your business may be structured around, but the overall value, like you're talking about. What are you bringing to the families of your employees? What are you bringing to anybody that walks through your doors or that you come in contact with, and finding ways to do that. And that ends up having a much bigger monetary effect on the business. In the positioning, we work a lot around market dominating positions and positioning businesses in certain ways in their specific market. So we try to evaluate their assets and position them, their differential points, and use those to leverage their position in the marketplace to make it better, to show their value in a different way.
Yeah, and when you're working with limited resources, how do you make the biggest impact with those limited resources? It's a allocation of limited resources, so, well, good stuff, man. I've enjoyed talking with you. So mention your website again. Yeah. How do people find you? Do you have social media pages, that kind of thing?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I'm not super big on the social media, but definitely check out Jordan Wilson on Facebook. But our website, if you guys are interested on finding out more about our consulting business and the services that we offer, you can check those out at upinstitute.com, upinstitute.com. Any specific questions, you can also email me, Jordan at upinstitute.com is my email address. So,
yeah. Well, excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's always good to hear somebody else's story of recovery as well, and then how that's played into your work world, your mission now in life, and how even from difficulty we can transform that into ways to be a blessing to those around us in the world, and
absolutely,
through every avenue. So. Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us on Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for sharing your story. Folks, thanks for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. We appreciate it. God bless you. We'll see you next time. This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.